Hello, I'm Gwenydd Jones, founder of the Translators studio. We specialise in teaching the art of translation and in preparing translators for professional translation exams like the DipTrans. In this video, Matt Leedham, an up-and-coming translator and ex-student of ours, interviews me from the perspective of someone getting started as a translator. The interview begins with my story on how I got started as a translator. We then get into a series of topics, including living abroad, whether or not to consider teaching English as a foreign language, translation internships, doing the DipTrans versus doing an MA in Translation Studies, and why I think going for the DipTrans is the better option for language graduates, the importance of specialisation for translators, my biggest failure and what I learned from it, and the wide range of opportunities for diversification that are open to skilled translators. In short, we discuss lots of issues that people wonder about when they're trying to get started as a translator. Matt agreed to do this interview from France, where he's currently spending a year abroad working as a language assistant at a high school and considering his next move in his path towards becoming a full-time translator. Translators, I give you me and Matt Leedham.
So, hi Gwen, would you be able to tell us a little bit about how you became a professional translator?
Sure. I would say that it goes all the way back to high school, how I ended up where I am today. At 16 in the UK, at that time, you had to choose 3 subjects to specialise in for A-level. And I didn't know what to choose, as most people don't. And I ended up doing chemistry, biology, and English literature. At the time, I was diagnosed with glandular fever, and I was sleeping virtually all the time. I'd come home from school and sleep and get up and go to school, and that was about all the energy I had. And I found that in chemistry class, I was falling asleep virtually from beginning to end. And so that, I think it was a hint saying, you're on the wrong course. And so I went to talk with the head of year, who also happened to be the French teacher, and I swapped across to French. So then, having done that, the doors opened at university for me to go and study French and Spanish at Liverpool. I did Spanish as a beginner from university. Then after completing that, I really just wanted to travel like a lot of linguists do. And so I decided I'd teach English as a foreign language because that seemed like a really good way to get across onto the continent with making some money and with a sort of support network. I searched for a Celta course. I found one in Seville. After I did that, I liked the city of Seville, and so I decided to get work there. My original idea was to spend a year in Seville and then go and spend a year in France. But I had such a good time there. It's a lot of fun in TEFL. And I just stayed, and a couple of years passed. Then I started to think about, okay, well, what is my long-term career here? I didn't want to stay in that world. And I decided that I'd start training to be a translator. So I had a little look. I compared, as lots of people do. Shall I do an MA? Shall I do the DipTrans? And I decided to opt for the DipTrans. Did a couple of preparation courses, went and sat the exam, and to my horror, failed it. Well, I didn't fail all. I passed 2 of the papers, which in retrospect, that's something to be proud of, because it's really hard to pass even one paper. But at that time, I had never failed an academic exam before, and I couldn't believe it. After that, I wasn't really sure what to do. I was very disappointed, and I decided that I would go and do an MA. I was moving between the UK and Spain, but I went back to Spain. I'd met the man who would eventually become my husband, and so I was teaching whilst I was doing that MA. Then I almost immediately went ahead to the second MA in legal translation. So in terms of work, about at the time of completion of the first MA, I transitioned out of TEFL. I'd stopped working in academies and I'd started teaching just private classes. And then I started sending my CVs out to agencies. And as the translation work grew, I reduced the teaching load until eventually it wasn't possible to carry on teaching, because really you have to be there when the translation agencies are sending out their emails. You can't be in the middle of an English class halfway across town.
Of course, yeah. Right, okay.
Mm-hmm. And so then virtually back to back off completion of the MA in Translation Studies, I transitioned into the MA in Legal Translation and working as a full-time translator while I did that. And then at some point along there in the middle, the DipTrans expiry date came. And so I went and I sat the last paper and I passed the DipTrans.
Excellent, great. So you just mentioned there, you say you did the TEFL, was it just for a year? So would you recommend that as a pathway for aspiring translators to get into the country and to do some teaching?
Well, I actually ended up staying in TEFL for a lot longer than a year. I was in for 5 or 6 years, I think, in total. As to whether I'd recommend it for aspiring translators, I guess there's 2 ways of looking at it. It is a very easy way to get into, to move into a country, to put yourself within an expat network and a good support network, to easily make friends and, just find a place to live, and all of the rest, sort of the challenges involved in moving to a foreign country. It's very good for that. On the downside, there is just the thought of, are you doing what you want to do? If what you want to do is translate, then teaching English isn't translating. And so if we're talking about things like preparing for the DipTrans, where beyond doing a preparation course, as you well know, Matt, you need to do as much practice as you can. And so if you're teaching English in your spare time, if you're teaching English for your work time rather than translating, then you're not getting that practice. So as to whether I'd recommend it or not, I think, yes, it's a possibility, but go into it with your eyes open and just remember that if you're teaching English, you're not translating.
Of course, yes. Yeah, no, for sure. And that's a really relevant question as well, for me as well, because at the moment I'm teaching English with the British Council in France. Mm-hmm. And so that certainly resonates with me in terms of the time that you're spending teaching. I do enjoy it a lot, but at the same time, I realize it's not really what I'd love to do in terms of translating. So just on that point, as an alternative, would you recommend instead, for example, doing an internship with a translation agency? Would that be a better kind of opportunity, or what would you?
I think, well, that would mean that you're translating, so that seems like a good choice. And also you would still, I've never done it, but of course you'd still have the network there because you'd be working in-house, so you'd have colleagues and things to meet. What I'd say about that is that you're not going to be paid very much. And so I would look very carefully at the options available and choose the best one that you can get into. Mm-hmm. In terms of budget, if you're not being paid very much, then you need to figure out how you're going to fund yourself. And maybe that comes around to the MA DipTrans question and what I was doing there when I was doing the translation studies MA, then doing the legal one. One of the big issues that upcoming translators have hit for many years and will continue to hit is specialisation. A lot of us are linguists. We've studied language at university. We've then done jobs that haven't created a specialisation. And so you qualify as a translator, and then you are like, okay, now what do I write on my CV? What am I a specialist in? Of course, where the bigger money is in specialist areas such as law, medicine, the more technical areas, places where you haven't got that many linguists who are capable of dealing with the more specialist subjects. And so one suggestion might be to think in terms of, if I don't do an MA in translation studies, all of those funds that would have gone there are there to support me through the internship, where I'm getting the experience and making the contacts. You could potentially do the DipTrans to give you the translation qualification, and then consider doing a master's degree or another qualification in a separate specialist subject that isn't translation related. When I think back, because people are impressed that I've done 2 MAs, but if you think about it, why on earth did I finish a translation MA and then do another one? And it's because I was a working translator, and I had been at that point for a year or so, and I could see that I wasn't able to compete in terms of specialisation. And so what I actually did was phone up my parents and say, I've made a bit of a mistake here. I need a specialisation. I need you to help to fund me through a second MA. They weren't as expensive in those days. And in retrospect, if I could go back and talk to my earlier self, I would have said, do a master's degree in something else. Don't do 2 translation MAs.
Right. Okay. Really interesting then. So yeah, for sure. Lot to think about there. So yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks for that. So just a little bit about kind of beyond that, in terms of when you sort of started establishing yourself as a translator, what would you say were your biggest failures?
My biggest failure, I mean, it's got to be the DipTrans. I mean, okay. failing that exam, because it showed me how difficult it is to translate professionally. A lot of people, the world at large thinks that Google Translate does translations. And then people who know anything about it think, well, I can write all right. I speak 2 languages, so I can be a translator. And that was certainly what I thought when I went into that DipTrans, and it taught me a lesson. Of course, at a personal level, as a result of that failure, when I completed my MAs, I felt there was a gap in the market for a course that combines the theory and practice that you get in an MA in translation studies with the specific exam preparation. And that was what inspired me to write the course that you've done. And then I wrote the conversion course as well to support that. And so as a result of failing that exam, I came to write the course. If I hadn't failed it, I don't think that any of that would have ever happened.
Gosh, right. So yeah, of course, really important sort of learning opportunities then and things. Yeah. So wow, fantastic. And I can say I've really enjoyed the course and benefited massively from it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So in terms of what, like, as a message to upcoming translators, what would you say there?
Something that I haven't been very good at is asking for help. When I first decided to become a translator, I didn't have guidance from anybody. I guess I looked on the internet a bit, and I guess I talked to the people around me, but I didn't have a mentor or anybody who'd really been there and done that to guide me and just talk things through with. And as I have developed in my career and also within my business, I've learned to start looking for mentors and coaches. Not always the same person. Sometimes you need a specialist for whatever it is you're doing. As a translator, obviously, guidance in terms of qualifications from people who've qualified, but not people who've only done one qualification. You need to talk to different people with a range of qualifications, because otherwise you'll just get influenced by a single opinion. But beyond that, say my first website was a disaster. And if I had worked with a coach or a mentor or someone with specialization in that, then I'm sure that they would have guided me through much faster to getting good results. The branding, if you want to promote yourself on social media, kind of straddling across now into the world of business as opposed, running a freelance translation business. Don't be afraid to ask for help, ask for it everywhere. And I would go so far as to say to pay for it. As long as you know it's a professional mentor or a professional coach, then all of the investments that I've made in that regard have really paid off.
Right. Wow. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And just kind of looking forward, what does the future look like for you?
Well, I'd like to say that I've got this great plan now with all, I've talked to my mentor and I can see it all clearly, but I guess no one knows exactly what the future will hold. For me, learning is everything. I looked at my CPD hours last year and I did 240 hours of CPD. I think part of it's just for fun. And so the future for me is definitely going to just be more learning, more investigation, trying to get better as a translator, better as a translator teacher. At the moment, I'm really enjoying copywriting and working on my copywriting skills at the moment in our newsletter is where I do most of my practice, and on the blog. And so I would like to work more in that area, maybe do some editing, maybe translate a book or a novel, which I did a long time ago, but I haven't done one in recent years, and work on perhaps more on the marketing elements, on the creative writing.
Wow, very exciting. Sounds like you can, yeah, going to be busy, but yeah, great. Excellent. Brilliant. Glad to hear it. Well, thank you. It's been really interesting and been really helpful to hear a little bit about your story. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this interview from the Translators studio. We specialise in teaching the art of translation and in preparing translators for certification through the DipTrans exam. If you like our content, please let us know by clicking on the subscribe button. See you in the next video.